Well, good evening, everybody. And it is a particularly warm welcome to our third Thursday. But of course, it is very nearly midsummer, so it should be nice and warm, shouldn't it, really? It's going to get even hotter, I believe, over the next couple of days. It's nice to have a bit of sunshine and dryness. My feet are still recovering after our pilgrimage and the Anthropocene stroll through the Norfolk countryside last week. I say a stroll, it was a 4-day stroll, and we had the whole range of wonderful East Anglian weather, including thunder and lightning, massive hailstones. But we did get some sunshine, and it was an amazing experience. And I want to say a huge thank you to Olivia and to Professor Susan Whitfield, who unfortunately can't be with us today, and to all of you guys who joined us for that rather wonderful few days. We're still processing exactly what happened, and I think some of us are still digesting some of the cake that we had to eat in enormous quantities. The hospitality of Norfolk churches, I tell you, is really something else. But it was a wonderful experience. And we're thinking carefully now about what we might be able to do with the Japanese end of that project. And of course, that's the whole point of doing this, was to have a pilgrimage here in Norfolk and a pilgrimage between Nara and the Ise Grand Shrine at some point in the future. But we will be getting on with that now and learning some of the lessons of those rather wonderful 4 days. It was a very busy month for us all together because I was in Japan for a couple of weeks with some of our Viking colleagues looking for Viking traces in Japan. We didn't find any Viking longships, unfortunately, but we did unearth at least one archaeologist who was very interested in the Vikings. So that was very good. And then we had conferences. We had the Japanese ambassador visit us in Norwich just before that. We had our Japanisms conference down in London at SOAS and at the University of the Arts London, the Chelsea College of Arts, the conference that we hosted in memory of Professor Toshio Watanabe. And we were all thrilled by the immense response that conference had. And I keep getting feedback from it. We had over 100 people in the rooms, and we had 500 people online. So when people say to me, Japanese art, nobody's interested in Japanese art anymore, I can say, no, that really is not the case. And here is the proof. We've got many, many people, and there were some very dynamic discussions altogether, a very successful set of events. I'll talk a little bit more about what we've got planned for July after the talk this evening. We've got a couple of extra things for you, but I don't want to delay us because we have a wonderful lecture awaiting us from one of our two Robert and Lisa Sainsbury fellows who have been spending the year with us here in Norwich. And this evening, Dr. Clara Momoko Geber-Mérida is going to be speaking to us on Japan's contemporary craft world, and in particular the role of women in that craft world. Many of you will have heard various talks about Japanese craft here at the Institute in the past, and you may have the impression that it's largely dominated by men. And that's the way the Japanese traditional craft industry has long been structured. But despite that, as I think we're going to hear, women have always been integral, absolutely integral to the craft movement, even if up until now, somewhat invisible to outsiders. I think Clara is going to put us straight on that. I'm not going to tell you what's going to be in the talk because Clara is going to give us a talk, so we can hear all about that. But I can introduce a little bit about Clara herself. Clara is a Japanese-Austrian scholar of modern and contemporary craft studies, focusing on Japan, on gendered labor and jewelry in particular. And while she's been with us, she's been working on a new monograph on women in the traditional Japanese craft industries in Tokyo in particular. And this is going to form a new book, which is going to be published by Bloomsbury, part of the SOAS Studies in Modern and Japanese Contemporary Japan series, just as soon as they can turn that around. But before coming to us in Norwich, Clara spent 6 years as a lecturer and assistant professor in Japanese studies at the Free University of Berlin. Listen carefully, because I believe that Clara is going to be giving us details about a special exhibition that she's going to be bringing to Norwich in September as well. So that will be something else to look forward to it. A big welcome to our friends online as well. This evening's talk will last for about 50 minutes, and hopefully we'll have some time for Q&A if I stop speaking quickly. For our online audience, please use the question and answer box, the Q&A box, located at the bottom of your screen, to enter any questions, and you can put those in at any point during the talk. And we will read some of those out, hopefully, during the Q&A session. And for those of you with us in the room, we will, as always, have our wonderful roving mic, and you'll be able to ask your questions. But I would always say, do speak into the microphone so that everybody online as well can hear what you would like to ask. Without any further ado, I'd like Clara to come and give a talk. Clara, over to you. よろしくお願いします。
Thank you, Simon, for this kind introduction. It is a real pleasure to be here. And I want to extend a warm welcome to everyone in the room and to those joining us online. Thank you for being here. Before I start my lecture, I want to express my sincerest gratitude to the Sainsbury Institute for the Study of Japanese Arts and Cultures. As a Robert and Lisa Sainsbury Fellow, I've had the honor of spending the past 9 months here as part of the vibrant academic community at the Institute. I've received support far exceeding my expectations, and the outstanding collection of the Lisa Sainsbury Library helped me tremendously in furthering my research. So thank you for all the support you have given me, and I'm looking forward to the rest of my tenure. One of my main tasks here at the Sainsbury Institute is to work on the editing process of my book, which is why the third Thursday lecture is the perfect opportunity for me to highlight some of the most interesting parts of my forthcoming monograph. With that, let me turn to the lecture itself, starting with the following phrase. I'm not a craftswoman. I'm just supporting my husband. I think that every wife of my generation will tell a similar story. The statement is by Kakumatsuko, who was born in 1948. I encountered her by chance when I visited a craft exhibition in 2022 to connect with women who are working in the traditional craft industry of Tokyo. After I lingered for a while at the exhibition, I've witnessed how beautiful Kakumatsuko presented the lacquerware she was selling. With her broad expertise on urushi lacquer techniques and objects, she elegantly answered any questions that she was asked, even on the most detailed aspects. When asking her why she has such a broad knowledge, she smiled shy and replied, "Because I do many steps myself." Only the final coat of lacquer has never been done by her on an object, as the final touch has always been done by her husband. Upon questioning her if this does not make her a craftsperson herself, she denied it immediately, saying that she was not a craft professional. In her words, she is just supporting her husband. Kakumatsuko has been working in her husband's lacquerware business in the district of Arakawa in Tokyo for over 5 decades. This makes her an essential figure in her husband's trade since the couple's marriage in 1970. As a devoted wife and mother, she has been creating, repairing, exhibiting, and selling lacquerware objects while raising their children. This is one style of lacquerware object the couple frequently creates and sells at exhibitions in Tokyo. A small wooden cup adorned by the craftsman with multiple layers of lacquer, made using techniques he had learned over a decade as an apprentice of an established master. But if we ask questions about the wife's role in the whole making process and listen carefully to how this cup was made, it becomes clear that it was created with the division of labor between husband and wife. Indeed, the colors of the object would stay hidden unless someone skilled uses wet sandpaper to highlight them under the surface layer of the objects. This technique is called nakatogi and is performed by kakumatsuko. This leads to a more complex design as the varying pressure can lead to colorful, multi-layered patterns. This is one of the final steps before the husband uses domestically produced urushi that is known for its transparent amber color. At last, the cup is hardened for at least 2 months in the hardening cabinet on the second floor of the couple's house. This is another cup the couple made together, a lacquer beer cup made of unglazed ceramic, decorated with irregular organic cells outlined in gold, red, and green against a dark ground, almost covering the entire exterior surface. As we can see here, this pattern was carved by hand, and depending on the pressure, a different color appears as it lays a different layer open. When creating more intricate patterns, as is the case with this beer cup, the husband often begins a design that his wife then completes according to his specifications. Despite playing such an important role in making lacquerware, Kakumatsuko does not identify herself as a craftswoman. Her reasons are manifold, reflecting a complex entanglement of societal norms and expectations inside the craft industry. One of the reasons is that she has never completed a formal apprenticeship under an established master. Another reason is that she has no creative freedom or agency in the making process of lacquerware. Her situation is shared by many other women. Yet they remain invisible to us unless we ask the right questions and listen carefully. Let us turn to a different craft discipline. This is a copper teapot that was created by Nagasawa Toshihisa, who is the current owner of a workshop specialized in Edo metal hammering named Nagasawa Workshop. He took over his family's business as the third generation after his father and grandfather founded the workshop in Tokyo. As a craftsman, Nagasawa works with Edo metal hammering techniques by choosing a texturing hammer to decorate the metal. Then, he continues by shaping and adorning the metal surfaces by hammering them over the course of many hours. Nagasawa designs, creates, markets, and sells copper and silver teapots, spoons, and cups with these beautifully hammered metal surfaces. There is, however, another technique that is involved to finish this teapot. A rattan tying technique that is necessary to protect the hands from heat while handling the metal. Rattan also provides the handles with an aesthetic look, as there are different patterns to elevate their appearances. This technique is performed by the master's younger sister, Nakamura Akiko. Unlike her brother, Nakamura Akiko has never recognized herself as a craftsperson or considered seriously to take over her father's workshop. Similar to Kakumatsuko, her reason is deeply rooted in the way traditional craft was practiced in her family. In fact, Nakamura has thought that only men could take over craft workshops until recently. Although Nakamura did not take over her father's business, she was trained by her mother to take over her role as support at the workshop. According to her, it has always been the assignment of women in her family to tie rattan on the handles of teapots and to be responsible for the workshop's accounting. Most of the women who learned this rattan tying technique are from her mother's or even grandmother's generation. They are therefore either very elderly or have passed away. Their skills were never considered a traditional craft technique. Like Nakamura Akiko and Kaku Matsuko, women who have been actively working in the traditional craft industry of Japan were invisible for centuries, unseen, undervalued, and mostly anonymous to us. Yet, their skills and roles are truly crucial for the industry. Without their presence, many workshops and craft businesses would not have survived, and their techniques and disciplines would have been long forgotten. And while it is common for women to be overlooked through history and dismissed as unpaid workers, some structural issues remain unique to the traditional craft industry of contemporary Japan. These issues keep challenging upcoming generations of young craftswomen who are striving to become professionals in this field. And this is, in fact, reflected in the number of officially registered craftswomen in Japan today. In 2022, the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry surveyed nationwide that women make up 16% of the total number of registered craftspeople in Japan. This means that only around 8,600 out of the 54,000 craft professionals in Japan are women. This number denotes that the world of traditional craft remains male-oriented, as most of the established and well-known craftspeople are men that inherited a renowned place. One reason behind the relative scarcity of women is that craft workshops in Japan are still mostly operated as family businesses, so-called kagyo. This is a common feature of professional life in Japan, since men remain more likely to work as employees or as self-employed managers in family businesses, while women are more likely to work as unpaid workers or in the household. And to keep the company within the family, craft techniques were usually handed down from the father to the eldest son. This head of the household hereditary system reaches back to the Edo period, but is still customary in the present. This implies that the imagination of men, their techniques, their visions, and their beliefs were passed down to the next generation of craftspeople. And as a result, I would consider the occupation as a craftsperson as a gendered occupation, associated with stereotypical characteristics that men are assumed to possess, such as aggressiveness, competitiveness, strength, and power. Women, on the other hand, were usually invisible, working in the background of workshops, perceived as they were across Japanese society as naturally caring and supportive. Like Kakumatsuko and Nakamura Akiko, women family members such as mothers, daughters, grandmothers, sisters, and women who have married into the family were working behind the scenes in family businesses for decades. And to secure the male legacy, it was common to adopt men to train them to take over the businesses. Another reason is that it was considered inappropriate in the past for women to take leadership roles in the public. However, there have always been exceptions. There are cases in which women family members were accepted as craft makers to take over an existing business, simply because they were the only ones who could. This is the case for Takenaka Yoshie, who has been working as a doll maker for over 6 decades. In 1965, a year after Takenaka Yoshie married her husband, she started to assist him at his workshop, which is specialized in traditional dolls. This shows how she entered the traditional craft industry in a similar way to Nakamura Akiko and Kakumatsuko discussed earlier. According to her, she became her husband's assistant by copying him and his techniques. How to form the doll's body with hay, washi paper, wood wool, and metal wires. And finally, how to assemble all other doll components, such as the face, the hair, hands, and feet to create the final object. Takenaka Yoshie's husband remains listed on the workshop's official platforms as the owner. In reality, however, he is not able to work anymore due to his age and declining eyesight. Takenaka Yoshie thus had no other choice other than to take over her husband's business on her own, despite never having intended to become a craftswoman. This has allowed her to work independently, which remains unusual for makers of her generation. Yet, like with anything, times have changed for the traditional craft industry of contemporary Japan. The Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry observed in 2022 that the number of traditional craftspeople is decreasing due to the aging demography. Furthermore, the ministry observed that the production value of the traditional craft industry has fallen below £4.7 million since 2008. The reasons behind these developments are not surprising, as craftspeople feel that customers have little understanding and use for traditional craft objects in the present. While the target group of the industry is aging, there seems to be little interest among young people, which in turn leads to few successors who are willing to pursue a career in this field. And this is further compounded by the fact that higher production costs make it harder for craftspeople to sustain their businesses. While this gives little reason for optimism, not everything appears to be lost. There is a glimmer of hope when we look at the upcoming generations of women who are aiming for a career in the traditional craft industry of Japan. This recent downfall of the production value and status of handmade objects coincides with the rise of women in this industry. This implies that the lack of successors is linked to the reason why more women are nowadays accepted as apprentices than ever before, which can be perceived as a positive development in the industry. This means that the precarious situation of the industry somehow helps, ironically, to overcome the strict gender barriers in traditional craft. Today, women are given the opportunity to not only work in the background of workshops as assistants, but officially as apprentices to establish themselves as masters in the future. Especially as there are not many young people who are willing to work in a precarious industry. And as a result, women are often the only people interested in pursuing a career in the field of traditional craft, especially women family members who grew up seeing their fathers and grandfathers' love and care for traditional techniques. And this is why we see a rise in the number of women who are currently in training. This is creating a great shift in the world of traditional craft as new norms are created to ensure this field's existence. It also just drastically changed the way women narrate their identities within this world, as they have a wider range of roles they can perform in this industry. This points towards a question that remains largely unaddressed in the broader discussion of contemporary craft in Japan. In what ways are women changing traditional craft? These changes are especially evident in settings where both older and younger generations of craftspeople continue to practice and allow us insights into how they impact the industry. Such places have become increasingly rare as younger people have few opportunities to learn traditional craft techniques, and older craft makers are slowly disappearing. In pursuit of an answer, we turn to one of the smallest districts in Japan's capital and home to the women makers introduced in this lecture, the district of Arakawa in Tokyo. The district of Arakawa has been known under two names: the City of Traditional Crafts, Dento Koge no Machi, as well as the City of Craftspeople, Shokunin no Machi. Both names are a testimony of its flourishing industry and large number of craftspeople who work and live in this area. These names also imply that the sphere of traditional craft is important to the district's image. This is the reason why this area offers an ideal case study for examining the impact of women within this industry. The district is located in the northeast of Japan's capital city with 10.2 square kilometers in size and a population of around 224,000 people. This makes Arakawa roughly 1/5 the size of Norwich by area, with 1.5 times the population. Similar to the other districts or special wards in Tokyo, Arakawa has a legal status that resembles that of cities and therefore has a high degree of autonomy. Approaches regarding education, welfare, and housing are therefore a matter of district politics. What makes Arakawa inherently unique is the district's dedication to provide a foundation for promoting traditional craft. What is understood in the district as traditional craft leans on the definitions established by municipal and national policymakers. The term dentokoge is composed of the Chinese characters for tradition and craft and refers to handmade objects that are both practical for everyday use and are aesthetically pleasing. As everyday objects are shaped by the consumer's lifestyle, traditional craft can manifest as lacquerware, woodwork, tableware, clothing, or ceramics, but also as musical instruments or military equipment. The term dentokoge itself has its origin in the modern period, as it was introduced in the late 19th century as a translation of the Western concept of craft. Before this, Japanese art and craft were grouped together under a single category, shukogyo, which may be translated as handmade objects. In the 1980s, Arakawa's district officials grew alarmed at the decline of the local craft industry, despite the broader economic prosperity Japan was experiencing at the time. It was in response to this that they enacted the regulation for the protection of cultural properties in Arakawa in 1982. To support the district's maker of traditional craft, a registration system was adopted to foster the visibility and promotion of local craftspeople. As so-called bearer of traditional craft techniques, craftspeople are appointed for their excellence in techniques. One important requirement for registration is that craftspeople have been working in the industry for over 30 years. Another one is that the techniques have their origin in Tokyo. This implies that a craftsperson who was trained in Kyoto or Kanazawa, for example, cannot be registered as a bearer in the district. The reason lies in the way traditional craft techniques are bound to regionalism and have certain local differences. Arakawa's registered craftspeople are invited to yearly exhibitions, lectures at schools, conduct workshops, and are promoted via the district's homepage. The techniques and works of the registered bearers are also captured as movies to preserve the knowledge for future generations. In Arakawa today, there's currently a total of 55 local craftspeople who are recognized as bearer of traditional craft techniques. And out of these 55 people, only 5 are women, including one craftswoman who recently passed away. As they reflect on their journeys in this industry, Arakawa's established craftswomen narrate their feelings about the disciplines and its centuries-old customs. Some lament that the world of traditional craft is restrictive, as certain ways must be perpetuated without any freedom to adapt. The reason is deeply rooted in how traditional craft is envisioned. This leads to a narrow range of eligible disciplines and objects, thereby causing the decline of some disciplines that are not deemed traditional. Being a craftsperson then comes with many rules and expectations. The makers allude to the industry's precarious situation by describing it as incredibly difficult to survive in. This hints to other rule givers in this industry. Modern consumerism, which is reflected in changing tastes and the preference for mass-manufactured goods. What most of the district's craftswomen share, however, is that they are happy to be in this world, as they are working in an industry they genuinely love. However, many traditional craft workshops go bankrupt since craft objects no longer have the high status they had before Japan's industrialization in the 19th century. Furthermore, obtaining traditional materials and tools becomes increasingly difficult, as a chain of craftspeople is often necessary to complete a single object. Amendments in this industry are therefore necessary to guarantee its survival. And those changes are reflected, among other things, in the gender of its successors. In 2009, the district officials established a system to train the next generation of craft masters for the future. The Arakawa Craft Training Program is one of few possibilities for young men and women in Japan to apply for a financially supported apprenticeship under an established craftsperson without joining a craft school or university. Given that Japanese universities charge high tuition fees, this is a remarkably democratic way of providing access to the field of traditional craft. With the help of this initiative, young women and men can apply for a 3 to 6 year-long apprenticeship under an established master living in Arakawa. This opportunity is financially supported by the district and encourages individuals who are under 40 years of age. Successful candidates receive a monthly grant and rent allowances that cover daily expenses in Arakawa. The teachers receive a small teaching fee and receive compensation of the material costs necessary to teach their techniques. The application addresses people who aim at a career as a craftsperson and desire to live in the district of Arakawa. It is therefore possible to live outside of the district, the city, or even Japan at the time of applying, but the candidate is expected to move to Arakawa after a successful application. However, places in the Arakawa craft training program are very limited, since only a small number of Arakawa's registered craftspeople decided to pass on their techniques. The reason is that teaching responsibilities take up a lot of time and energy that is necessary for the craftspeople to work on objects themselves. This presents an additional reason why vacancies in this program are rare. Most of the craftspeople can only take one apprentice at a time due to limited capacities. If we look at the Arakawa craft training program's current apprentices and recent graduates, we see a significant change in the gender balance compared to the established craftspeople in the district. This is striking, as this came about naturally, without any devotion to increase the presence of women successors. The program counts 14 active graduates and participants in Arakawa. 7 women and 7 men are currently educated by established professionals in Arakawa or are working as junior craftspeople, so-called wakate shokunin, since their graduation. This number of junior craftswomen suggests a generational change because the group of established women in Arakawa is comparatively small. And we will now turn to some of these makers, their teachings, their objects, and their visions to examine how these women are actively reshaping traditional craft. According to the established craftspeople in Arakawa, an apprenticeship was usually completed within a confined space defined by strict rules and boundaries. Teaching has never relied on in-depth explanation. It has always been a process of showing. Masters demonstrate particular steps, which apprentices then imitate until they've developed the confidence to work independently. What they often describe is the repetition of certain techniques until the body naturally remembers them, using the phrase "karada de oboeru," remembering with the body. In addition to that, teaching traditional craft techniques has always required living and working together. Hence, the master and apprentice spend a considerable amount of time together until the apprentice is ready to take over an existing business or to open their own workshop. Between the established craft makers, it is said that it takes at least a decade to become a master of one's trade. In Arakawa's elderly generation of craftspeople, there are many who underwent this kind of traditional training. Tomura Kinuyo, for example, is one of them. As one of 5 established craftswomen in the district, she specializes in Edo ornamental hairpins. She was born in 1941 as one of 7 children in the prefecture of Yamagata. Having grown up with an uncle who was a craftsman in Arakawa, Tomura came into contact with these hairpins from an early age. Since Tomura's aunt and uncle had no children, they offered her to become their apprentice at the age of 16. Like her male contemporaries, it meant for Tomura that she would leave her parents and live with her relatives as a live-in apprentice. Someone who is offered training as well as a place to sleep and meals to eat as compensation for their labor. In the past, her pathway as a woman was considered highly unusual, and Tomura remembers clearly how it became a sensation in her hometown that a young girl moved to the city to do an apprenticeship. Her gratitude is strong, as she considers herself extremely lucky to be taken in by her aunt and uncle at such a young age. And today, she refers to them as her parents, as she has spent her life with them since graduating school, working and living side by side with them. Considering how Tomura learned traditional craft techniques, the situation for outsiders must have been especially difficult for those with no direct family members in the trade. Since most established craft masters were men, it was considered inappropriate and potentially dangerous to send girls or young women to live and train with them. The way in which traditional craft has been taught can therefore be considered another reason why women were hindered from entering the trade. If we move to the younger generation of craftswomen, we can see a change in the way how techniques are taught today. Masters and apprentices nowadays have separate living spaces, as the live-in apprenticeship is not an option anymore. The current economic climate also pressures craftspeople to teach classes to supplement their income. This has a strong influence on the way the techniques are taught. Over recent years, it has become necessary for established masters not only to demonstrate techniques, but also to explain them. Many of the apprentices take notes or take video footages of their teachers demonstrating and explaining particular steps to ensure they can follow them. Where once it was sufficient to make the objects, craftspeople today also feel a responsibility to pass down the history of their craft. This is how Mekaru has learned two different styles of Edo lettering. As a participant of the Arakawa craft training program, she received daily lessons by Nakamura Yasuhito, who has written and published a book on the history and techniques of his trade. Here, she's working on a commission by the National Theatre, a signboard for a kabuki play to decorate the lobby of the entrance hall using Endo Kanteryu lettering. Such signboards usually feature the current kabuki play's title, the starring actors, and the synopsis that are offered by the theater. As you can see, Mekaru looks relatively small compared to the signboard, with a height of around 1.8 meters and width of around 2.5 meters. Since finishing her apprenticeship, Mekaru has been assisting her teacher in his most meaningful commissions. And now she's teaching Edo lettering side by side with him twice a week by explaining, demonstrating, and giving meaningful feedback to students. This makes traditional craft far more accessible to a broad audience. In some cases, teaching traditional craft to a wide audience has also changed the materiality of the discipline. This is demonstrated by Kasahara Itsuko, a registered craftswoman in the district of Arakawa for Tokyo Tegagi Yuzen kimono painting techniques. Born and raised in Yokohama, Kasahara had limited options to enter the craft industry, which is why she moved to Tokyo to start an apprenticeship in the 1980s. According to her, it was at a time when it was still considered unusual for women to have a career outside the family's home. She herself was trained only to paint with Yuzen techniques on kimono silk, a luxurious material that has a high price point. Among her most loyal customers are those who work in the world of the tea ceremony, or who commission tailor-made kimonos for Shichigo-san, the celebrations marking a child's 3rd, 5th, and 7th years. As kimono fabrics are considered a luxury good, Kasahara does not consider them as suitable materials for beginners students. She therefore instructs her students to draw on handkerchiefs, fabric bags, umbrellas, or scarves. And as you can see, those objects decorated with Tokyo Tekagyusen kimono painting techniques seamlessly blend in between kimono for women and men, for dolls, decorated obi belts, and silk fabrics. We turn now from how craft techniques are taught to the objects themselves and to changes in design. For outsiders and consumers, this may be the most visible transformation in traditional craft. Women who are at the forefront of craft businesses or are working alongside their masters until they are ready to take over bring a different approach to their work than their male teachers, and in many cases create objects in the way they themselves would want to wear or use them. This significantly changes the landscape of traditional craft. The degree of change varies substantially across disciplines and depends on how much creative freedom makers have to implement new directions. In disciplines where greater creative freedom is permitted, the changes in design are more apparent. This is the case with the discipline of Tokyo Clissoné enamel works. Both Hatakeyama Kana and Sakamoto Akino are graduates of the Arakawa craft training program and currently work at Hatakeyama Clissoné enamel manufacturer in Arakawa. The workshop's master acknowledges the changing times and reflects the zeitgeist in the way he gives his employees the freedom to create new designs. Hence, while crafting objects with traditional techniques, Hatakeyama Kana freely incorporates her preferences for smaller frames and lighter colors into her works. This image here shows a pendant of Hatakeyama Kana's first original jewelry series, Petit Gâteau, which refers to a French chocolate cake. As the name suggests, the design is influenced by her affinity for France and its patisserie that look like works of art. Hatakeyama narrates that she did not really like the designs that were made so far and therefore did not want to wear those jewelries herself. The main reason is that the objects were made with dark colors and wider shapes that are traditionally used in the discipline. The pendant here is made of gunmetal and has a diameter of 2.5 centimeters. As customary in the discipline of Tokyo Clissoné enamelware, the liquid enamel color was applied with a fine bamboo spatula. To determine the shape of the design, Hatakeyama Kana first started searching at the library for books about French cakes and sweets. The pendant's overall round shape is reminiscent of a donut, and the pastel colors are inspired by the packaging of ice creams. By incorporating her own tastes into her designs, she further reinforces her identity as a woman maker in the industry of traditional craft. It also has the effect of broadening the discipline's audience, reaching younger women who may not yet have had the opportunity to encounter traditional craft. Similarly to Hatakeyama Kana's design, Sakamoto Akino's work shows how playful objects of traditional craft can be. The Lucky Cat brooch is made of gunmetal and glass enamel. For this design, Sakamoto reinterpreted two well-known Japanese lucky symbols. Her first choice, the lucky cat, is also known as the figurine beckoning cat, the famous manekineko, a figurine of good fortune and wealth. The second lucky symbol in this design is a money bag that symbolizes wealth. The so-called kinchakubukuro is a drawstring bag to carry money coins. This Lucky Cat series is a well-loved design sold both at Hatakeyama Clissoné enamel manufacturer and at the Tokyo Metropolitan Art Museum, which speaks to the importance of accessible selling spaces for traditional craft. Another discipline that embraces the change in its design is Edo woodblock prints. Nagai Saiko and Abe Sayumi completed the training as part of the Arakawa craft training program at Sekioka Woodblock Studio. Since their graduation, they're working as independent woodblock carver in Tokyo. As woodblock prints are traditionally created with a division of labor, there are usually 4 people involved in the making process. a designer or illustrator, a woodblock carver, a printer, and a distributor or company that sells the prints. Hence, depending on who Abe and Nagai decide to work with, the nature of the object can drastically change. The goal is clear: to make Edo woodblock prints more interesting to our younger audience by making them more affordable and interesting. For example, Abe carved the print 4 Seasons that was designed by the illustrator Erika Ward and printed by Ogawa Nobuto in 2022. Since Ward is active on Instagram, the workshop's team reached out to her to initiate a collaboration. This led to an object created with traditional techniques, but incorporating modern designs. If you look closely, the 4 prints depict not only the seasons with the often repeated natural motifs such as cherry blossoms for spring, hydrangea for summer, momiji leaves for autumn, and snow for winter. Strikingly, Ward used 4 different convenient chain stores to create the design of those seasons. There is a specific reason why Ward incorporated the well-known chains of Lawson, Family Mart, 7-Eleven, and Seiko Mart into her designs. The intention behind this is to make Edo woodblock prints more approachable. The prints are also significantly smaller than usual, which makes them more affordable. Similar to Abe, Nagai also frequently carves woodblock prints with contemporary designs. Today, her portfolio includes carvings with images of famous movie or music stars, such as the American rock band Kiss, or well-known characters of Japanese anime, like Naruto. She also created a carving with characters of the Star Wars series. These works are strictly licensed objects, as these figures are protected by copyrights. This is one example of her carvings, a series of 3 prints with the title Ultraman Trilogy. It is inspired by a famous Japanese science fiction series that was first aired in 1966. She was commissioned this object by a company and carved 3 images of the superhero Ultraman and his enemies. Similar to the size of Abe Sayumi's work, the Ultraman prints are much smaller than usual to market them towards a younger group of customers. Another discipline that allows a high degree of creative freedom is Edo metal carving. Tamura Naoko, who is a specialist in this discipline, is the most recent appointee as a bearer of traditional craft techniques. Designated in 2021 at the age of 54, she is also the youngest of the group of established craftswomen to be appointed. Her teacher, Katsura Morishito, is a well-known master who was recognized a living national treasure in 2008. Today, Tamura Naoko is the proud owner of a workshop in the district of Arakawa and Ginza. She frequently creates metal objects that are not only suited for her customers' everyday life, but also show her artistic self-expression. Hence, they're leaning more towards the definition of art rather than craft. Tamura Naoko's work, Embossed Water Drop, is a small water vessel for tea ceremonies that she created in 2012. Tamura explains that she hammered the work out of one single silver plate and further embossed the daisies using the uchidashi technique. To achieve the spherical shape, she heated up the metal after cutting it to her desired shape. After that, the silver is soft enough to be embossed on the surface of both sides. The pistils of the daisies were colored with a liquid mixture of gold and mercury, and the butterfly was crafted with copper and gold alloy. Although Tamura used techniques that were passed down for centuries, the object embodies Tamura's individual artistic expression. She originally made it as her personal response to the triple disaster in the Tohoku region of Japan in 2011. During these dark times, she wanted to create something hopeful, which is why she decided to emboss the vessel with daisies. For Tamura, The daisies remind her of the birth of her daughter and feeling the happiest in her whole life when she was able to finally hold her. She has since associated the flowering daisies near her house with the happiness of having her child. With this work, Tamura demonstrates how the boundaries between traditional craft and art have become increasingly blurred today. As we have seen, Arakawa's craftswomen are evolving from invisible workshop assistants to recognized visionaries within their industry. They're making their techniques accessible to a wider audience through new materials, designs that reflect their own aesthetic sensibilities, and a use of traditional craft as a personal artistic medium. A common thread runs through all of these changes. Women are challenging the boundaries of tradition by making the disciplines more accessible. The younger generations of craftswomen and apprentices are also actively signaling that traditional craft is open to young people and increasingly are looking beyond the domestic market towards an international one. A vision for traditional craft that has stayed with me came from Fukatsuyoshiko. Born in 1955, Fukatsuyoshiko is the first woman to manage Unkindo Fukatsu folding fan shop. She has completed an apprenticeship under her father, Fukatsu Kozo. Fukatsu's grandfather on her father's side initially started the lineage of fan makers in 1860. This makes Fukatsuyoshiko the fifth generation of folding fan makers in her family. As none of her siblings were interested in pursuing a career at their father's business, he had no other choice than to take his daughter as an apprentice if he wanted to keep his business within the family. Fukatsu's father, however, was quite an unconventional teacher. Walking together in the neighborhood to talk about art and craft has been an important part of his daughter's studies. Furthermore, Fukatsu's father encouraged her to travel. He sent her to visit museums in Paris, observe fashion in Milan, and to admire jewelry in New York. This demonstrates how beautiful an apprenticeship can be. In case of Fukatsu, it has not only been about learning the techniques. It has also been about seeing the world, its colors, shapes, and textures, discussing them with her father, and then creating a craft object. This had a profound influence on her vision for folding fans. For Fukatsu, it became the mission to create folding fans that can be taken out of an Italian luxury bag without looking unfamiliar. This is why she has the dream to distance herself from traditional prints, as we can see here, which Fukatsu has been limited to until today. The last maker I would like to introduce is Kumaki Kaho, who reminded me that the youngest voices are sometimes the strongest. Born in 1998, she's one of the youngest craftspeople in her community in Tokyo and started her training in 2021. With the vision to preserve while also adapting her craft discipline of choice, Edo metal hammering, Kumaki is striving to follow in her master's footsteps. Her vision is clear: to make traditional craft more approachable by showing that people like her are accepted in this field as well. As you can see on this slide, Kumaki is coloring her hair and wears casual clothing, whereas people working in large companies in Japan, including Kumaki's former workplace, are still limited to black or brown hair and formal workwear. With her appearance, she's trying to combat the cliché of her industry being strict and unapproachable for younger people. Kumaki's statement makes it obvious that she thinks a lot about the openness and accessibility of traditional craft. This is particularly due to her being younger and having a social circle that tells her that her field is stiff and difficult to approach. Especially since Kumaki started to attend exhibitions at department stores, she notices that there are hardly any younger customers coming to buy traditional craft. Kumaki's passion to educate her customers shows clearly that she's actively trying to change how craft is perceived by today's society. As a young woman who fully identifies as the next generation in this industry. Before I close, let me take us back to where we started. We began with invisible women in traditional craft, working in the background of workshops, unrecorded in surveys, and unknown by outsiders. What we have seen since is that their invisibility was never a reflection of their absence, but of the structures that surrounded them. The next generation of craftswomen and women apprentices is changing that. They're going beyond the traditional technique of showing and imitating in their teachings. They're actively changing the designs by embracing their own tastes and by collaborating with international illustrators and animation companies. And finally, they're challenging the mentalities of traditional craft to make it more accessible. The question now is whether the industry and the institutions that support it are changing fast enough to meet them. Smaller craft businesses are often unable to cover parental leave, making it difficult for women to continue their trade despite being highly trained. This forces many to rely on a partner's income, making it harder to return to making, selling, and teaching traditional craft. Supporting women in their roles as caregivers would therefore be a meaningful step towards enabling them to remain in the industry. For younger generations of women makers in particular, mentorship programs would be valuable, offering guidance not only from teachers, but from a third party working in a comparable environment. This could help bridge the generational gap between established masters, who are often in their 60s to 80s, and apprentices who are mostly in their 20s to 30s. A mentor positioned between these two generations could offer perspectives and solutions unfamiliar to either. And since young women in this industry often lack an active female role model, a structured mentorship program could help them navigate traditional craft on their own terms. Two additional structural changes would benefit the industry more broadly. One would be tax reductions on workshop rentals, especially for disciplines requiring large equipment or generating noise. That would ease the financial pressure on craftspeople who cannot work from home. Younger makers are especially affected as they typically rent a small studio apartment while also having to cover the cost for a separate workspace. And finally, providing accessible spaces to sell craft objects without commissions of between 20 and 60% would benefit the industry as a whole. These are changes that require policy, institutions, and industry. But there's also something each of us can do starting today. Many of the apprentices and younger makers have begun presenting the work across social media. Every time someone follows them and shares their work, it is a genuine act of support, giving them the visibility they need to further their careers. Craftspeople today must largely rely on galleries and department stores to reach a broader audience, with between 20 and 60% of the object's price taken in commission. Buying directly from makers is therefore a tangible alternative, and one that is becoming increasingly accessible as more craftspeople sell their work online. Every time someone seeks out a traditional craft event, here in the UK or in Japan, they are contributing to an audience the industry desperately needs. Being present shows that the public is genuinely interested in traditional craft and can make a significant difference. More difficult to address is the situation of women who have worked in the industry invisibly. How can women be supported if nobody knows they exist? Those working in the background, often practicing techniques passed down for generations, deserve the same recognition as every other maker in this industry. Their techniques are undocumented and, without intervention, will quietly disappear. For researchers and stakeholders alike, the first step is one, as signaled at the outset of this lecture. We need to ask the right questions, listen carefully, and give these women the support they need to continue. This is how we begin to make invisible women visible. On that note, I would like to attempt to do exactly that here in Norwich this September. It is my great pleasure to announce that I'm organizing and curating a photography exhibition on craftswomen in Arakawa, which is generously supported by the Sainsbury Institute. The exhibition will be held at the Old Piano Shop Gallery on St. Benedict Street from the 1st to the 13th of September. It is titled Making Tokyo's Craftswomen Visible, Traditional Techniques in Motion, and will present 20 framed photographs from my fieldwork in a similar style to the images you have seen today. For further information, please refer to the event page of the Sainsbury Institute or reach out directly to me via email or on Instagram. I would be delighted to see you there. Thank you so much.
Wow, my goodness. Well, there we are. What a fantastic invitation to end an absolutely stunning presentation with. Thank you so very much. And I think you've done an enormous amount to make these invisible but absolutely crucial people much more visible to us here and hopefully to our audience all around the world as well. I'm sure we have some questions. I'm going to kick us off by just asking, take us back to Arakawa. I'm intrigued to find out how you got involved in the craft world in Arakawa and what it was that led you there in the first place.
Thank you, Simon, for this question. This is actually a full circle moment for me because I started connecting with these craftspeople 10 years ago as a bachelor student when I was doing an apprenticeship in the district of Arakawa in Tokyo. And back then, it really hit me how hard these women are working and how amazing their objects are. And I was also invited to translate an exhibition on traditional craft objects, which was then organized in Vienna in Austria. So yeah, for me, this project is a dream come true. And I really want to emphasize that presenting their work and making them invisible is an absolute honor. So thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Clara. So, do we have any questions in the room? I believe Olivia, the wonderful Olivia, has a microphone. Anybody got anything that they would like to raise? There's one just here, Olivia. And then Bert.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very interesting talk. Do we know how the men viewed the women in the more traditional, where the women were working beneath them, if you like? Do we know how the men viewed them?
Yes. Yep. Thank you very much. This is an amazing question. So the craftspeople who I've spoken to are very appreciative of the women who are working for them in their traditional craft workshops. But it is about these women's identities because they themselves don't view themselves as traditional craftspeople. So changing this narrative would be the first step. And I've seen over the past couple of years that something changed in the way these women carry themselves in this field, especially since they were suddenly asked the questions by a researcher and not the established craftsmen. So they are highly appreciated. I just want to emphasize that. But it is about the narrative and how this industry has evolved over the past decades. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Clara. Thank you. I appreciate the interdisciplinarity of your approach, the way it's partly the appreciation and the art history, but also a sort of sociological side to it, a kind of women's studies aspect to it, even a sort of local history interest is part of this project. So all of that's very, very rich. I have two questions. One is, as a person who is particularly attached to ceramics, I was curious why I wasn't seeing too much ceramics, particularly in view of how there's been a flourishing of Japanese women ceramicists in recent years. And the other is maybe I wonder if you could speak a bit more about the tension between the definition of this category you've found as traditional and the ways in which it's not traditional, and that you've emphasized changes and departures and divergences from convention. And of course, in the 20th and 21st century, Japanese art has been filled with stories of radical ruptures and avant-gardes and even hostility to tradition. And I wonder if that is part of the story, and if not, what is behind the particular attachment to tradition that you're seeing?
Thank you, Bert, for these questions. So why no ceramics? Well, the reason is actually quite simple. None of the women makers in the district are specialists in ceramics. So I wasn't able to work with any women who are specializing in that. The second question regarding the tension between traditional craft and the way it is practiced in the district is quite complicated, because most of the craftswomen are leaning on the definition of traditional craft that was defined by the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry in the 1970s. And it is most of the craft makers, I think Japan, are leaning towards. And according to this definition, traditional craft work must be used in people's everyday life. The techniques and the materials must be used for over 100 years. And the craft discipline must be specialized in a certain area of Japan. So as long as you work with these, I would say, points, it is traditional craft in Japan. So they have a lot of freedom, and they are free in implementing these changes, which is why we see a lot of new designs, but not a lot of new techniques within the industry. I hope this answered your question.
We have a lady in the red jacket here, and then did we have some questions online as well, Laura? So let's have this one.
That noise. Yes, thank you very much for your talk. I was wondering about the last slide where the girl had the colored hair. I couldn't tell what her craft was, this one.
Yes.
What was it exactly? I don't think it was explained, or I didn't catch it.
It is Edo metal hammering. We've seen it in the beginning of the lecture, actually. They are creating mostly spoons and metal teapots, which are hammered with these beautifully structured, I can show you actually, surfaces. This here, yes. So Kumaki Kaho is the lady here on the slide, and she creates these beautifully surfaced metal hammered metal teapots. This is the opening of the teapot. The spout. Yeah. It looks like shoes. No, this is actually copper. So thank you for this question. Yeah.
Olivia, do we have a couple of questions online, perhaps?
We do. So the first one we have is in two parts. So the first part is there an evident bias amongst products towards crafts that are directed to female patrons or customers? And the second part of that question is, can the municipality maintain its vanguard role in supporting apprenticeships and housing?
Thank you so much for this question. So the first question was about the evident bias towards craft or towards women in the audience. I would say yes. And the reason is that most of the craft makers are now trying to cater towards a women audience, especially if we are looking at these accessory jewelry types of objects. They are mostly catered towards women. Another discipline actually that is now starting to cater towards women more broadly is Edo woodblock, wood joinery. So they're creating small makeup counters, for example, which are targeted more towards women, which is why a lot of disciplines are now moving towards this women-shaped audience. And the second question?
Can the municipality maintain its vanguard role in supporting apprenticeships and housing?
So in Arakawa, most of the money is actually going towards the housing of these apprenticeships and the apprentices who are living there in the district. And they're receiving a small housing fee and also some additional money to, well, pay their rent and also for the living. And this is making most of the research grant and grant for these makers.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. The next question is wonderful talk. Have you seen any instances of traditional crafts being devalued as more and more women get into them, referring to the phenomenon that as more women enter traditionally male-dominated fields, those fields tend to be devalued and seen as lesser, for example, in sciences and medicine? Do you think traditional crafts are at the same risk? And if so, what do you think can be done to prevent that?
Oh, this is a good question. I think it is quite hard to say that there has been a shift in the appreciation of traditional crafts because women are now working in this industry. So the buyers of traditional craft are now aging rapidly. So everybody is catering towards a younger audience. I don't think that this has necessarily something to do with the makers themselves rather than with who they are targeting. So I'm not sure if this is something I can reply to.
Fantastic. And one final question from online. Is it possible to visit these artisans' shop, Arakawa?
Of course, yes. Thank you for asking that. I will create a whole list and put them onto my exhibition page if you're interested, that you can visit and also buy the objects of these makers in person and online if you are in Japan. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you again, Clara, for not only a brilliant talk. I think Arakawa will be on my list of places to visit when I'm next in Japan, and I would love to go and see some of those, meet some of the people actually, and have the chance to see what it is they've been producing. I have just a couple of things to say before we wrap up for this evening and invite you all to come and join us for something, a little bit of liquid refreshments. For our online audience, have I got this right? Yes, our online audience, there will be a feedback form in your browser and in a follow-up email tomorrow. And as always, we greatly value any feedback, which helps us to continually improve our lecture series. And I should also just say that our feedback is hugely valuable for our funders and our supporters. And it's great for me to be able to go back and say, you know, here's just a little smattering of comments from our audience, because you are very, very special to us. There's not really anywhere else that I can think of and that our funders can think of where we have an audience like this that so regularly attends our lectures, and it means an enormous amount to us at the Institute and everybody who's helping us deliver these programs. Next month, we have something a little different for you. This is actually the last in-person third Thursday of this academic year for us here in Norwich. However, we've got two events for next month, and we'd very much like to welcome you to come and join us for both of these, if you can. The first will be here in Norwich, but will actually be in the Castle Museum, and that will be on Thursday, the 9th of July. So that's not the third Thursday, but that's the 9th of July. And there is a good reason for this. We've been delighted to host Professor Bert Winter Tamaki with us for the last 6 months, 3 months. 3 months. It seems like only a month, but it's 3 months. Professor Winter Tamaki is with us from the University of California at Irvine, and he's going to be giving a talk on Militia of Freedom, the art pedagogy of Kitagawa Tamaji. And this is part of a very exciting initiative for us, which is our very first workshop for a whole group of young researchers who have our Ishibashi Foundation Network Leader Fellows. We've talked about this program a little bit, but for the last year, since September last year, we've had 5 fellows in all different parts of the world who have been working on their own projects relating to Japanese art, and we're able to bring them all together in July, and they'll be spending some time with us here in Norwich, and they'll be here for Bert's talk and a workshop when they'll be presenting their own projects as well. And then we'll be taking them to London, where they'll be spending some time doing their own research as well. And in London, we'll be welcoming back one of our former Robert and Lisa Sainsbury Fellows, Professor Alicia Volk, who's going to be talking about her latest publication, a very exciting new book called In the Shadow of Empire, Art in Occupied Japan. You're all very welcome to come to both of those events, and there'll be full details on our website and in our July e-bulletin as well, although of course there'll only be a week or so between that bulletin coming out and Bert's talk. But it's been wonderful having you both with us over the last 3 months. Thank you. And those talks will be held online on Zoom as usual, as well as in person. And the talk on the 16th of July will be our third Thursday lecture. If I've got that right. I think that's how that works. So our third Thursday lectures, goodness, we've been running them since 2001. It still seems like just yesterday to me. And we are very fortunate in the support that we receive from the Gatsby Charitable Foundation, the Great Britain Sasakawa Foundation, and Yakult UK. Thank you once again to Clara. Thank you both to you in the room here and those of you online. We're looking forward to those of you in the room. Come and join us for a drink. Those of you online will have to make your own arrangements, I'm afraid. Thank you very much indeed. Please join me once again thanking Clara for that wonderful lecture.